thank you so much for joining us today. To get started, why don't you just give a really fast introduction of who you are, and then we can kind of get going.
Sure, yeah. My name is Ben Harris. I am the senior staff attorney at Los Angeles Waterkeeper, and I've been at the organization for about 4.5 years and excited to talk about the work that we do and kind of how I ended up at this role from a personal journey standpoint.
This is Caroline jumping in really quick just to give a quick disclaimer that everything discussed during the episode reflects Ben's personal views in his personal capacity and is not a representation of the official view of LA Waterkeeper as an organization. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, awesome. So, like we were talking about with the personal journey, what you just mentioned, we can kind of start there and then we'll move into some issues that we want to discuss and dive deeper into. But just to get kind of some context of who you are and why you decided to pursue this, there's a lot of options for environmental advocacy and sustainability advocacy. So, what made you decide to go the legal route? And also, from there, even what made you decide to join a nonprofit rather than go to a firm or go to the government?
These are all good questions, and I've definitely thought a lot about this myself as I arrived at this place in my career. I knew from a young age I wanted to do something in the environmental space because I was aware of the challenges that our global planet, our country, even our state of California was facing in just my education in high school and otherwise. I grew up in the Bay Area in Marin County in a fairly environmentally conscious household, and just felt that I felt this calling that I wanted my career to be something that helped advance our collective environmental objectives, protect more space, more natural environment, and do something to slow down all of the human impacts that we've been having on the world at large. So that was always kind of a driving factor in my education, in my potential career path. I ended up in law because when I went to college at UCLA, I was a marine biology major, and I thought hard about doing a hard science career, but ultimately felt that, at least for me personally, I wanted my work to effectuate change more than develop additional knowledge about the problems that we're experiencing. I wanted to try to help solve the problems, be part of the solution. And law always called to me because I was on the mock trial team in high school. I was, kind of in the legal space already from that experience and from other experiences in college, and thought this might be the way to structure a career around that interest of environmental advocacy and policy change. And ended up going to law school because after pursuing the scientific route, I just felt that, a PhD master's wasn't really going to give me that personal satisfaction. And just your last question, where I ended up in my career of policy advocacy, as you acknowledged, there's so many different avenues you could take to, have a career in this field. I opted for something that really was focused on my primary interest, which was water issues. Anything about water. That's why I was marine biology major. I always loved being around the ocean. So anything to protect our water resources was always the top priority. And then beyond that, I felt that LA Waterkeeper, where I work now, has this unique opportunity to help effectuate change in a local setting when there are all these global things that we could focus on. Obviously, climate change is the most pressing issue of our generation, of future generations. And I know that really smart, dedicated, capable people are working at that at the national level, international level. I felt more meaning being able to see the work that I do locally and know that I'm not just chipping away at this global esoteric problem, but instead seeing the impacts on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and like being able to connect to it on a more personal level and actually push for it more tangibly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for example, if you look behind us where we have this great water feature, imagine being able to build new ones like that, or construct, rehabilitate, restore actual waterways in our region, and then coming to them years later to see geese swarming around and having this kind of warm fuzzy feeling that you're able to contribute to the local habitat and environmental needs. That to me is a very tangible way to find that satisfaction in the work that I do.
Yeah. And do you feel like you didn't grow up in the LA region, but now you're obviously so invested in what's happening here in the city and the county and everything? Do you feel like you gained that connection to LA during college and like right away, or did it just happen that this is where the job was and now you're deeper into the LA community?
It's a good question. It's a lot of people come to LA from different places around the world.
Yeah.
I came here for college and thought it was a great place to go to school. And then I thought it was a great place to go to law school. I also went to UCLA for law school and just ended up kind of settling in, building a, social network here, a professional network. And now I don't know when it happened, but in sometimes the last 16 years, I blinked and now I feel like I'm an Angelino, right? So yeah, I love Los Angeles. I love the region, and I love being able to do anything that I can to contribute back to, the environmental goals that we have here. The one thing I have not picked up is any of the professional LA sports teams. I'm a diehard Bay Area fan. Go Niners. We're playing tonight. I just have to preface that because that's the one thing that maybe other people will look at me funny and be like, you're not really a true Angelino unless you like
I can't let that go.
Sorry, I'm never going to be a Dodgers fan.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
No,
but
that's fair.
I love Los Angeles all the same.
Yeah. So I feel like from everything you're saying, you've done a really good job of assessing what you want to do, but also maybe where your strengths are and where you felt like you could really contribute. And what do you think about you personally, or like the way you work, the way you view the world, has really helped make you a strong advocate and a strong legal attorney?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Again, because the field is so broad, there are many different skill sets that could help provide a really productive pathway in the environmental field, environmental policy, however you want to describe it.
Yeah.
I think my skill sets probably are more like, some of it I would say is more innate, to just things that I've kind of carried with me as part of my personality.
Yeah.
But one thing that I'm very mindful of is, and it's always a skill to be improved, is when you're advocating for something, think about what the response is going to be. This is, I think, where the legal training comes into play, because if you just argue passionately about what should be done from a moral or principled standpoint, you're probably going to run into a lot of roadblocks because there are limitations. There's feasibility constraints, there's financial constraints, there's even knowledge constraints where we want to do something right, but we don't even know what that is because we need to have the science develop a little bit further to make those calls. So I think one of the things I try to think about, and maybe it's a skill, maybe it's a skill in development, always skills can be improved on, is just being able to advocate in a way that appeals to the audience you're advocating to, and recognizing where you have weaknesses helps show other people why the strengths of your argument are even more justified and understandable. If you are screaming into the void is not going to do anything in response. But if you are passionately appealing to somebody who you understand where they're coming from, what their role is and everything, you're more likely to succeed that way. So, I mean, maybe that's probably the top one I would say that I try to think about every day in my job, and, have some good days, have some bad days. But generally speaking, I think that's how you can actually start making change in the world.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, because a lot of people in the environmental space are super passionate, but there is sometimes that disconnect of like, you're very passionate and you're speaking your truth and your passion, but that doesn't necessarily translate into anything if there's nothing extra behind it.
There's multiple aspects of what it takes to be a successful advocate. One is having the right mission.
Yeah.
The second one is having the right messaging. And then the third one is also having the right messaging or approach to the specific audience that you're appealing to. I'm going to say something in court very different than I would say to the media or to a partner organization or to an agency that I'm appealing to. So all of those things kind of fall into place the more that you go into the policy world, but it's certainly something that might take a bit of an adjustment once you're starting to get your feet wet in what it takes to be an effective advocate.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So with all of these advocacy thoughts and perspectives, let's get into some of the issues that you are passionate about and that like Waterkeeper focuses on. And obviously there's a lot of water issues in Los Angeles and the world, but what do you personally think are like the top 3 most urgent issues that LA faces?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually an interview question that we ask legal interns.
Wow.
We distill it down to 1 because recognizing that 3 is a lot to ask, but it's something I think about a lot too. And there's no right answer. And the other caveat to note is a lot of these are interconnected. So there's a lot of things that I could say that touch upon multiple issues. Though, first one I'll just start out with that we could always talk more about is water supply. We're living in California. The Western United States, generally speaking, is a very drought-prone region. and we built up a massive city of millions of people, a massive county of, I think, 15 million people in Los Angeles County, entirely dependent on external sources of water. So one of the things our organization focuses on as a general principle, and then we apply it in specific ways, is trying to achieve a climate resilient, local, sustainable source of water that we can tap into year to year and not have to worry our imports getting curtailed from the Colorado River, from the State Water Project. So the more we can create that local resilience, the better off we'll be as climate change has even more, dire impacts. The second issue that is, pervasive and something that we still haven't figured out how to get right is water quality. How do we make our waterways user-friendly for the environment, for ecosystems, for humans, for all of the ways that we want to use it? That doesn't necessarily seem to have the public's mind set on it. People don't think about water quality. Generally speaking, if you walk by the Dominguez Channel, which is somewhat close to here, or the Los Angeles River, you might not really care how dirty the water is because you're not really going to go into it. But there are a lot of people that use those waterways, the inland ones, for kayaking, for even fishing. In the Los Angeles River, there are people that fish for carp in some stretches. And then you also have the ocean. There's a lot of people that swim, that surf. And the impacts of water quality end up being financially cumulative and significant when if you count for all the sick days that result from people that get exposed to bacteria or other toxic chemicals in the water, that leads to missed productivity time and impacts our local economy. It impacts the tourism industry. So overall, that does have a pretty pronounced effect. And I think about that a lot as we're approaching the 2028 Olympics that Los Angeles is hosting. So I don't think our water quality problems are going to be solved by then. We basically have, polluted waterways throughout the entire county, but we're working on it. It's a long-term effort, and, a bunch of little things help with that. And then the third thing that is kind of a passion project that I'm helping to work on at LA Waterkeeper is to restore our inland channels and waterways to be more natural. And I can get into that more, but the Los Angeles River, 51 miles of mostly concrete channel, and that to me is the biggest opportunity to start doing right by our region and achieving our local goals for climate resilience, helping with water supply, improving water quality, and just having that be kind of the focus point for all of our collective region-wide goals for climate resilience, environmental justice, etc. So that's something that I'd love to talk about more, but it's in my view the way we start moving forward to a more holistic, progressive Los Angeles.
Yeah, actually, I'm down to go into like naturalizing inland waterways a little bit more, just because in LA and coastal areas, I feel like the automatic focus sometimes just goes straight to the ocean and the beach and the coast because it's so big and so signature and all of that stuff. But the inland waterways are so important, even if you care about the ocean. Like, it's all connected and people live inland. That's actually where, if it was in a better condition, where they could recreate more and enjoy it more. So I guess, what are you guys working on to try and get more places naturalized, or just increasing public awareness and education and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on some of the reasons why it's so important to us. Is as a county, as a region, the inland communities end up bearing the brunt of our pollution, whether it's air pollution, water pollution. And if you trace the Los Angeles River on a program called Cal EnviroScreen, which is a mapping tool that the state of California puts out, that tool highlights all of the regions, the neighborhoods with the highest pollution burdens. And if you trace the LA River on that map, it is basically abutted by the most pollution burdened communities in our entire region. It's like a red trace that you could follow, red being bad, obviously. So that alone is kind of the reason to focus on the Los Angeles River. If we can do right by the river and create more green space, more outdoor recreation, reduce the urban heat island effect, create more cooling zones, then in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, those communities are going to be much better off than they are now when you look at how much hardscape they have in their communities. So that's the reason of why. And then what can we do is the big, $1 million question, or should I say
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Because, the brief history is we channelized these inland waterways for flood reasons because we built too close to the river. And over 100 years ago, we did not fully appreciate the fact that we live in a flash flood hydrology system here in Los Angeles, that when it rains, the mountain regions, the Santa Monica Mountains, the San Gabriel Mountains, they produce so much water that all flushes out into these rivers and creeks and channels, and that leads to massive, massive flooding. If we build right next to it, then anything that's built there is prone to being flooded out. So when that happened multiple times in the 1930s and earlier, we ended up as a region channelizing all these waterways. So the main thing that we as an organization are trying to confront is how can we achieve that same flood protection in a different way than the channels? Right. And to me, that is going to be transformative for Los Angeles, but it is going to require a lot of work, a lot of investment in off-site, large-scale water capture locations in the watershed, and it's going to take a lot of money. But we think it's so important that that could help us create corridors of habitat, connected habitat that serve endangered species, migratory birds. It could create this urban cooling zone corridor for the inner city neighborhoods that have the least park space, the most pollution burdens, the worst heat island effect. And if we do that right, then we can start using that as a model to do the same for the Dominguez Channel close by to here along Drew Park. We can do that for some of our other inland waterways like the San Gabriel River or up in Malibu. There's mostly naturalized, but there are many stretches of different inland waterways where we had to channelize for the same reason, and getting a template down of what it's going to take to restore that safely is going to be instrumental to improving the entirety of our region.
Yeah. And you guys are still working on the full vision of what that could be and what that could look like, but would that include removing the concrete that's currently channelizing the river, or is the current vision more restoring within the concrete boundaries?
The ultimate goal is to remove as much concrete as is feasible. Right. And that word feasible carries all the weight there, because we can't do anything tomorrow that would allow us to remove more concrete. I mean, maybe we can look at some stretches. Okay, I guess they want to be.
We have a goose friend that wants to make a comment.
How do you feel about this? Seems like it's quiet down. So we think there might be some stretches of the river right now that are actually reduced in their flood risk to the point that we could start removing some of the concrete. But we don't know what those specific stretches are, because the main knowledge gap that has existed since I started at LA Waterkeeper is what is the overall amount of water in the specific kind of storm events that these channels are designed for from a flooding standpoint. How much water would overtop the river right now, to the point that if we were to create a restored river scenario where we explain this is how we want it to look, and then we do modeling to see how much water would overtop that naturalized river, that would give us a target of what it is that we need to accomplish in the watershed to actually get there. Right. So far, we've only done that according to the current state of the channels. We've only done that with the assumption that we're going to keep the concrete in place. Okay, I see. So right now, if we do that modeling, which we have, modeling tools that can do that right now, then it will tell us maybe there's some stretches of the river that don't actually have that much flood risk. We can start taking out some of the concrete. That's really great. But doing that in a few places here and there is not going to achieve our goals. We want to see connected habitat, connected river naturalization. And so that's going to require us to make those tough judgment calls, like what you're saying. Is it removing all the concrete, or is it removing just the bottom portion of the concrete where we can have vegetation and keep the concrete sides for flood protection? Or can we create these terraced walls of the river in some of the wider stretches where we could build green space, we can build more vegetation on the side walls, but still, retaining the size of the channel and retaining a lot of that flood capacity. So those judgment calls are very challenging, but we don't have to come to a decision yet. We have to kind of do modeling for various scenarios.
Yeah.
And then figure out what the delta is in terms of the amount of water we have to control. And then that will help us figure out from a, more localized perspective, what type of restoration, naturalization we'd be
right, like
looking
what
at.
the on-the-ground projects will end up looking like.
Yeah, because, I think the key takeaway is that there is no one-size-fits-all restoration. There's not one way to do any kind of restoration. It's all site-specific. And when you're talking about balancing restoration with flooding, there are many ways you can go about it in some of the most flood-prone stretches of the river, that you don't have to go to the same full solution of remove every single square inch of concrete. And we would never advocate for that, because I think, the lift of having to do that everywhere along the river would just be so big that it would collapse under its own weight.
Right. Yeah. And like these personalized projects to each region is something that is relevant to most restoration work and water work in general that you guys are doing. And when it comes to connecting this issue with water quality and other approaches to solving these water quality issues, I guess, like, how does it all connect, and how can that transition and bring people into other issues like water quality, which might not be as have that like sex appeal or whatever that giving them a green river might.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the answer in short, which I'll explain more, is the idea of doing projects that serve multiple benefits.
Right.
The way we got into this situation for the LA River is by doing single purpose infrastructure. We thought about how do we solve the flooding, and we did not think about how do we solve flooding while maintaining ecological health, while maintaining access to the river, while maintaining recreational opportunities. We just said we need to stop the flooding and forget about all else. Let's just focus on flooding. So that might have served the time of the 1940s, 50s, but that doesn't serve today, where we have enough knowledge, we have enough expertise in these different areas to make some certain design changes or small tweaks to a project that can actually open up a lot of other benefits.
Right.
And where we are right now at Alondra Park is a great example of one of those projects. Over in that direction, there is a project that Los Angeles County is doing to build an underground stormwater capture system. So every time it rains, this new project would kind of divert some of that water from our storm drain system, which otherwise would just go right out to the ocean, and send it to this park where it would be captured, it would be treated, and then it would either be released back into the storm drain system and discharged into the ocean, but clean, or it would be retained and used for water supply purpose.
Yeah.
So when you look at that kind of a project, that seems great. We have now a water quality improvement. We have a potential water supply benefit. And when you go over to the park, if you look at it now, it's almost finished with its, kind of surface level construction. It will end up just looking like a park. It will look like a flat expanse of green space that might have recreation opportunities. I think there's a baseball field that was there before. So any recreation field now, basically what this project kind of shows is we can turn any recreation field into something that also serves our water goals.
Yeah.
And is there ever a point now, if we're going to build a new park or a new recreation field, is there ever a point to just build the field?
Yeah. And not include...
It would be a waste opportunity, right? And the biggest limitation there is obviously funding. It's a lot more expensive to dig up all this earth and to build infrastructure underground. But if you can do that and balance all those interests, you're going to end up getting the most bang for your buck, because if you then have to do a separate project focused only on water quality, water supply somewhere else, that's going to cost you more cumulatively than if you can combine it with this new athletic field opportunity.
Do you feel like there is a political and public will to make this more of a norm, or do you feel like it's still kind of a battle to not just have a proof of concept like Alondra Park and other projects going on right now, but just convincing people that this is something we should continue doing?
I think we're really fortunate that Los Angeles has already thought ahead about that, and we have dedicated resources to make those types of projects a reality. 7 years ago, in 2018, the LA County voters passed Measure W, which authorizes $280 million worth of parcel taxes to be dedicated toward building these multi-benefit projects that serve water goals. So that is in perpetuity. That money is coming in every year. The program's been going on for 7 years now and doled out, over $1 billion in project funding. And projects like Alondra Park, they benefit from that funding. That is the way that the political will, the resources have been dedicated to this type of project.
Yeah.
That's not going to do everything that we need. $280 million, that's a lot, but projects these days cost 8 figures to build, like a big, capture project. So it's going to take more investment. I think our local government agencies here understand the value of these projects and are committed to doing them. And the question is just, how do we get even more resources into the region, especially at a time when the federal government has a lot of uncertainty and resource rollbacks. The state government is dealing with its own priorities. How do we make sure that we're still keeping that continued investment flowing into these really critical projects? It might just be something that's going to last multiple decades of work, investments, in planning to figure out where to put these new projects.
Yeah.
But I think the political will's there, and we're just helping or hoping to try to orient our decision makers to look at specific regions, watersheds, waterways, and try to connect those projects to each other, so we're not just doing them in isolation.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And LA is very interesting. I feel like because there is this political will, which is very good, there are still sometimes things to balance because LA has so many different tiny governing bodies, and the way that governance is split up is so interesting, and all of the neighborhoods are so unique. And how do you think that sometimes serves the purpose of trying to get everything to connect and create this beautiful mega city, and how is that sometimes a challenge and something that you need to think of very specifically to Los Angeles?
There's a lot of pros and cons about that framework. Los Angeles is unique in its governance. It is a complete mess. In some ways that's good, in some ways that's very challenging to deal with. The good is a lot of local cities can prioritize things a lot better than regionally.
Right.
If you're a small city that has a smaller department and one staffer in that department can really push their elected officials, their superiors, to invest in multi-benefit projects or focus on water issues, that's going to make that city a leader compared to a different city that maybe is a little bit bigger, dealing with other bigger picture issues, that isn't able to make those same priorities.
Right.
The biggest challenge, though, is when there's so many cooks in the kitchen, it's very hard to get them all to agree.
Yeah.
Right. To get them to sit in the same room together and make decisions on questions that affect all of them, or, in a complicated watershed like the Los Angeles River, things that happen upstream are going to affect the cities that are downstream. So the city of Long Beach is always dealing with the sewage spills that happen upstream. It all comes through the river and washes onto the Long Beach beaches. And now people can't go on the beach for multiple days. That happened last week, that there was a sewage spill. So if you're going to have those kinds of cross-jurisdictional impacts, you need to have cross-jurisdictional collaboration to solve them. What we don't have is a really pronounced, targeted, effective way to have that governance happen in collaboration. We're calling for unified governance approaches for the Los Angeles River, where imagine the 17 different cities with jurisdiction within a mile of the river can have a forum where they meet regularly and they look at different objectives, different project proposals, and can make decisions together and all of them be able to voice their concerns or priorities. And that is, I think, what's going to lead to a more unified, consistent vision for the LA River. Whereas if we try to keep going at it the current piecemeal approach, we're not going to get that.
Yeah, that like unified long stretch of habitat.
I mean, what if, for example, one city that has this much of the river says, you know what, we're going to prioritize development instead. We're just going to, instead of, protecting available floodplain or restoring floodplain, we're going to build housing. We're going to build industry. We're going to build commercial buildings because that's what we care about most. We want to get the tax revenue, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Those are all laudable goals. It's just a question of where is appropriate for that, and where should we put all of our resources toward protecting and enhancing our environmental resources, like the LA River, that have been underlooked for decades.
Yeah. So your role within LA Waterkeeper, do you do a lot of work with these governing bodies and this advocacy of trying to get people together, or is most of your work focused somewhere else in other efforts, and you contribute when needed or where needed?
There are definitely some forums that present opportunities for that kind of advocacy directly to the local governments.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, we're still in kind of a half step back planning phase where our goal right now is to crystallize everything that I was just talking about in terms of what are we trying to achieve for the river into a more science-driven, clear, singular, comprehensive vision for how the river could look like
Mm-hmm.
if we are able to achieve the same flood protections through naturalization and other actions in the watershed, and what it's going to take to get there, which would include developing some unified governance systems.
Right.
And we can come up with approaches and suggestions. We already have a lot of research that we've put into answering that exact question. What kinds of governance structures? Is it a joint powers authority? Is it some kind of a new, legislatively created body or something?
Mm-hmm.
There's options, but the point that we're still, really trying to emphasize is to get the public and our elected officials on the same page that is what it's going to take in order to achieve these goals. And then hopefully we'll have at that point the political buy-in to get these agencies to start working together.
Right. That makes sense. And with collaboration and political buy-in, I think we can also talk a little bit about water access now, which is the first issue that you mentioned. Because LA imports all of its water, it has to collaborate not just within itself, but with all of these other states and cities and parties that also rely on the same water systems. And I think part of the multi-benefit of projects like Alondra Park that we mentioned with the stormwater systems could be gaining a little bit of control over our own local water back. But how can all of these different regions potentially collaborate better, and how can LA kind of look out for itself in this scenario?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question is,
Yeah.
what is it going to take
What
to
is the
create
answer?
that resilient local water supply? It starts with, in our view as an organization, stormwater capture, because every year, if you look at a normal rainy year, an average wet season, we send, because we've channelized all of our waterways that basically act as superhighways for stormwater whenever it rains, we are sending about 100 billion gallons out to the ocean every year.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to really think of that number in scale. I wish I knew offhand the, per capita domestic use figures, but suffice to say 100 billion gallons of new water supply is a lot of water. Yeah. So right there, if we're able to capture that water, prevent it from going to the ocean, not all of it, but some of it, then that's a local water supply that every time it rains, we're doing our part to capture our own water. I think that there's this kind of misunderstanding that because it barely rains in California and Los Angeles, especially relative to Northern California, that we're just never going to be able to be self-sufficient on our own, rain if we, even if we captured all of it. I don't know if that's true, but I know that it would make a huge, huge impact in the total figure of what we need to create a local water supply source if we are able to capture that water instead of letting it out to the ocean. And then the second thing we need to do, no matter what, is don't just let any water that we use go out to the ocean.
Yeah.
So if we do capture the stormwater and we clean it, and then we put it in our, whether it's, potable systems for drinking or non-potable systems for outdoor use or other, non-drinking uses, if we just use it once and then send it to a wastewater treatment plant that then sends it back out to the ocean, we're still just doing the same thing, right? We're using water once and then we're sending it out into the ocean when that water itself that's already been treated could be reused.
Right.
So another huge thing that luckily has had a lot of traction in the region and that we're fully supportive of is recycling our wastewater and taking all of the sewage that goes into that wastewater treatment plant, treating it to a highly purified degree, and then putting it back in our water system for some type of use rather than sending it out to the ocean. And right now, I think I don't want to overstate the estimate, so I'm going to say kind of the lower estimate that I think I'm more confident in. I think we send 230 million gallons of treated wastewater into the ocean every day. Whoa. So, we're talking about a big scale of water there. So to recap, if we capture more rainwater, use it, and then we treat the water that we use and then reuse it, we might be able to create more of a closed system, right? There's going to be some inefficiency. There's going to have to be some discharge.
Right.
But then we can start weaning ourselves off of all the imports that we could rely on to achieve that similar result.
Yeah, I think becoming independent and creating these closed loop systems are going to be really important. Like as we move forward, it's already such a big concern.
Yeah.
Trying to get ahead, although we're already maybe behind, is going to be really important in creating these systems. But how do you think, or Waterkeeper think, there can be more public outreach and public buy-in to these projects? Because sometimes maybe people hear about recycled drinking water and that might scare them a little bit, but that will be really important, and keeping our water here is so important, and like what can be done to kind of boost the public image of all of this.
Yeah, it's something that I think the agencies that are putting on these projects are thinking about. We call them pure water projects. There's Pure Water Southern California, which is put on by the Metropolitan Water District. There's Pure Water Los Angeles, which is a City of Los Angeles project by the City of LA, LA Department of Water and Power, LADWP. So when you have those, marketing approaches, the hope is that's going to resonate with people. I know there have been, toilet to tap opposition campaigns, right? But a lot of that comes out of a lack of full education, not just about the need for looking at that kind of a water source, but also what it actually entails. It's not going to be taking toilet water and turning it into water that you can drink in your glass. It's going to be blended with other water and then retreated and maybe put in the ground and let it percolate through the ground where it can be treated naturally. And then you take it out of the ground later on for use. So there's always going to be safeguards. And I think the public is starting to understand that. It's, I think, a multi-pronged approach to try to, educate people about the benefits. But in my view, it always starts with education. If you're talking about, I think it starts with the youth and making sure that kids these days understand the value of conserving water. I think we've done a really good job in Los Angeles in how we think about conserving water relative to other regions. Like a lot of things we do every day and take for granted, people in the Midwest or the East Coast, there's plenty of water. They can leave their, sink running while they're brushing their teeth to let the water heat up. It doesn't matter to them because there's plenty of water. But for us, I think it's more part of our ethos here to be thinking about that.
Yeah.
And that's a great example of how we can go forward with conservation. Still more to go, of course, but we can do the same with our water supply as well. Where are we getting the water? And recognizing that just because there is water in other regions we can import doesn't mean it's a good thing to do that.
Right.
And that the more we can create local water sources, the better we're going to be in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. How do you feel like LA Waterkeeper does that outreach to like younger generations, what you were talking about, like having people from early on just default to accepting these ways of conserving water and looking out for our water systems? Is there anything that you guys do to contribute to that journey? And
we support agencies and other organizations that we partner with in their efforts to do, especially youth targeted education programs.
Right.
We're not really leading those programs ourselves. We more focus on kind of the policy aspect of all the work, the high level stuff. We're like the inside baseball group that we try to go to all the agency meetings. We have contacts in a lot of the different agencies and influence things that way. But we do have a lot of other organizations that focus on kind of the youth, the school age education. And, I think the main thing that we do is we have community engagement events that we host fairly frequently. We have a community engagements manager that helps put on, boothing at different events that other organizations or agencies run. We do our own cleanups along the LA River at beaches and just getting people out there to kind of see what we do, see some of our messaging, and just talk to a lot of the staff that shows up to those events. I think it's kind of slowly adding to this understanding of, the next generation wanting to be good stewards of our water resources and not just, climate change or some of the other kind of big picture issues that most of the youth these days are focused on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as LA Waterkeeper is tapped in with so many different organizations and so many governing bodies, do you think you guys really, I guess just like, how do you guys leverage all of those relationships to be such a well-known nonprofit in the area and a trusted organization here?
Yeah, it's it's a lot of repetition of just putting in the time to really connect with individuals at agencies, to connect with individuals at our cleanup events. I personally try to answer the phone or email whenever anyone reaches out with a question. This is a great example. I would never want to turn down an opportunity to just engage with more people about the work we do. And, I get a lot of questions from people that are interested in going to law school and they want to learn what it's like to be an environmental attorney. What was my career path? And I'm always happy to talk about that. And I think that kind of the mission driven focus of our organization means that most people that work at the organization feel similarly. So you'll see people at cleanup events that, our staff will be talking to folks for a long time about anything that they really are passionate about too. They have a lot of questions. We try to answer them as best we can. And then just from an actual, day-to-day work standpoint, it's just staying in touch with folks that you want to have a good relationship with so you can make sure you still have the opportunity to advise them on how to do their job most effectively. We have contacts at Los Angeles County, at the city of Los Angeles, at regulatory agencies. And the more we meet with those folks, and just even if it's a check-in, hey, what's going on? Is there anything we can help with? Offering to help as much as asking them for help for our mission is a great way to show that we're not just here to tell you what to do, but we're here to work with you and try to achieve our same goals the best we can, because a lot of folks have the same goals and they just don't know how to do it as effectively as how we would want to do it if we were in control.
Right. When you're doing, like you were talking about earlier, how you communicate depends on who you're talking to, and it's really important to get that right. And when you're connecting with all of these different groups and connecting them potentially to each other and within yourself, when you're thinking about how to do that communication, you're thinking about who they are. But I guess for you personally, like, do you have a thought process that helps guide you to get the right messaging and get the right approach?
Sometimes in the moment it's hard to have that thought process because I'm trying to, balance speaking and conveying what our priorities are with trying to, be thinking on the fly how that other person wants to hear it. And that's a skill that is, again, as I was saying before, still in development. It's still something I'm thinking about. I think the other key that puts you in a better position for success in those moments is preparation. So if I'm going into an agency meeting and there's something I can comment on and I'm not familiar with what that agency normally would approach this kind of a comment about, I want to put in some time to look at their mission, about their past decisions. And if I'm writing a comment letter that I'm submitting on the record, it's a little bit easier to kind of do that research and develop specific points, make edits. If I'm doing an oral, statement at a hearing or something, that same preparation will help me ensure that I have a few points in there that show that I'm understanding what it is they're trying to accomplish and what their limitations are. Because as soon as you seem like you are completely divorced from the reality of how they operate, they're just going to tune out. So, it's like active listening in some ways, or, if you're talking about communication with like a partner or a friend and you're having some challenges and want to kind of talk through some tough issues, you need to listen as much as you need to be heard. And I think that's really important, even if it's a one-way communication in like a public comment setting. So just thinking about that ahead of time, I think puts you in the best position of success. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. There are now times where I can, give those kinds of oral comments without thinking as much about the setting, because I've done that a bunch of times already and I know how they operate and I know exactly how to, try to get right to the point of appealing to them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. When it comes to people who are learning about water issues and wanting to get involved and wanting to learn more, do you have any recommendations of how people can take action?
It's a great question.
It's a very big question, so we can kind of categorize if you want.
There's a lot of things that people can do on a personal level. Always think about conservation. If people want to get more interested in getting involved in specific projects or some of the initiatives that we as an organization or other partners are doing, you can obviously sign up to our website for newsletters and emails and stuff. But I think the big thing is just really being faithful to that mission and thinking about it in the context of how do I ensure I'm, effectuating the most change in the world?
Mhm.
It's not always going to be on individual decision making. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's going to be about, who you vote for, and making sure that when you're looking at an issues list for elections or whatever, that whatever issues you do care about, make sure that's front and center. And, like, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but
Yeah.
I know that it's very complicated when you have a two-party system, right? But
Mhm.
holding, all sides accountable for ensuring that there is this priority given to the issues you care about is effective. It's helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I think organizations can, and even companies, private companies that can help innovate, can have a bigger impact than a lot of individuals. So at the same
Mhm.
time, I don't want to hold any individual Angelino to this high bar of having to solve the problem on their own. It's okay if you
Yeah.
spend a little more time in the shower. It's okay if
Yeah.
you operate a car that isn't entirely electric.
Mhm.
You're not going to be perfect, and there's no point kind of beating yourself up over a world that and a society that's imperfect.
Yeah.
We have to see that change on the societal scale. So I think just the more that you think about the big picture changes, the better you might be able to find how you can contribute to those changes, whether it's supporting an organization or getting involved in actual policy work or politics at large.
Yeah. Do you have recommendations of resources or practices to help people learn about those bigger issues and connect with those bigger issues, or just like become more educated so that they can feel more confident in any decisions that they do have to make, or maybe find some sense of comfort, because sometimes it
Yeah.
can be very stressful trying to decide, where do I fit into all of this? How do I
Yeah.
balance my personal responsibility with, not, like you were saying, not beating myself up over my one small role in this big world?
Yeah. I mean, we have some educational resources on our website, I'm sure, that kind of offer some good starting points. So you could always start there. Something I personally find helpful is staying in tune with some of the local politics. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever city you're in or county, unincorporated area, if you subscribe to newsletters or notices about things, even just to see and hear kind of the top level highlights of what is happening in your region can help you get a sense of it. Because if a project like the Alondra Park stormwater capture project
Mm-hmm.
is being built and you're in the jurisdiction of that project and you get a notice about it, you might now drive by it and have a better sense, like, oh, this is a water project. That's really cool. I never thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a fact sheet associated with it, so you could see the value of it. And you can go to public meetings or hearings where they talk about what the environmental review looks like. And all of that, it's optional. It's based on your level of interest, but at least having the awareness is always the start, right? And
Yeah.
just like being in tune with the fact that all this stuff is happening in the world. I think that's one of the best values I've found being at LA Waterkeeper is I feel much more connected to the local happenings in Los Angeles from an environmental perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That, if I were to drive by this park, I already would be able to be like, I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
Or this park, oh yeah, I recognize that name because of this project that was done 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it just makes me feel like I can see the benefits a little bit better.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like as big of an uphill lift of all the stuff that you have to do moving forward. There's a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
if it allows you to focus on what's already being done or has been done, it'll make you feel a little more optimistic. At least that's my hope.
Yeah. And I guess, like, you're talking about also paying attention to your very local news and what's happening in your local municipality. I feel like sometimes, like, even for me, that gets kind of lost when you're thinking about politics in your community. And I guess, what role do those, like, small governing people and representatives and governing bodies play, even though we might not be thinking about them all the time?
Yeah, I mean, those folks, if you're at a small city, um, let me think of a good example. The city of Southgate is,
Yeah.
a small city along the LA River. You might think, okay, well, the city of Southgate, they have, I don't know, some, tens of thousands of people, population, probably a very small budget relative to the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
What can they really do to make change?
Mm-hmm.
But when you have folks, as I was saying before, you have really dedicated agency folks at a small city like that want to do the right thing and have at least the right partnerships or education of, what priorities to focus on. They can be the driver for that change in their community. So city of Southgate has developed multiple, green projects over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Urban Orchard is probably their flagship, which is a site right next to the LA River, former industrial site. They cleaned it up of contamination, and they built new wetlands that has water that's captured from stormwater whenever it rains from the LA
Yeah.
River, and they can use that to grow local produce
Mm-hmm.
that are available for seniors living close by in a mobile home. That's one example of how you can achieve multiple benefits, and that all started because of the dedication of not just nonprofits that were kind of raising this idea, but the dedication of local city leaders that wanted to make that happen and put their resources toward making it happen. And that doesn't even require them paying for it themselves necessarily. It just requires them to put in the time and effort to go get grants or work with other conservancies or other agency partners. So I think there's a lot of power in the small actors, and people need to realize that, but we also need to have them sync up with the larger actors in order to achieve that kind of regional benefit. And that's kind of the example of how Southgate was able to do it. So imagine seeing that in all of the 88 cities across Los Angeles County. We can make a difference locally as much as we can regionally.
Yeah. So I feel like you've talked about a lot of issues, talked about a lot of points of hope with like good projects that are happening and things that can be done and kind of are being done at different levels. But do you have, this might be hard, but if there was like one thing that you want to leave people with, do you have like a nice takeaway that you want to give?
I've definitely had a few of those over the years, and I'm trying to think of where I am now.
Okay.
I think at least what I try to think about is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the possible, right? We work with a lot of groups that, as I was saying before, come in really principled and are absolutely 100% correct, and just face a lot of challenges in getting the ideal situation in place. And that's feasibility, it's political support, it's financial, whatever the reason is. Starting somewhere and recognizing when you have a win, when you've done something that's good, even if it's not perfect, that you can maybe iterate on in the future, or if that can serve as a template of how we can then take it a next step further in the next project somewhere else. I think that's how we get to the long-term change, because it's just it's frustrating, but we can't change society tomorrow. We just can't, right? So I am going to rest easy at the end of my career knowing that I did something to move things in the right direction. And of course, I'm going to probably look back and say I could have done a lot more. I should have prioritized this issue, because now once, 50 years later, we know how bad that was or whatever. But at least I did what I could, and being able to be adaptive to new information as that comes up, to say, well, I thought this was the right way to go, and now pivoting a little bit, this seems to be a better approach. That is just natural. That's something that we struggle with as a society, is to recognize when we might not have been correct about something. So, stay true to your principles, but be ready to compromise when needed in order to achieve positive progress, and be flexible in, being told that there might be a better way to do it, and earnestly be open to listen to that perspective. I think that'll help make people more effective advocates, and maybe more accepting of the universe that we're given, right? And trying to do our best without demanding perfection. That can keep you up at night if you really think about too hard about that.
No, that's very true. I guess if people want to connect with you or LA Waterkeeper, where can they find you guys?
Our website is lawaterkeeper.org. Pretty simple. You can always email me. My name and contact information is on the website. Just to say it now, it's ben@lawaterkeeper.org. So feel free. I love, talking with community members who are interested, and happy to, offer any guidance on careers in the environmental policy space. I think it's really admirable that a lot of people in the next generation are really interested in this field, and I want to support that as best I can. I've gone a few different routes. Even before I joined LA Waterkeeper, I did a little time at a private firm, and I worked for a judge for a year. I also did a little bit of work at UCLA School of Law as a fellow to try to teach some of the, upcoming law students. So I've seen a few different worlds, and I have a good sense of, how I think you can really make a good impact in this field. So always happy to talk. And I
Yeah.
work on so much. The other thing I didn't say before, I'm kind of like the Swiss Army knife in the office.
Mhm.
So, you know, I've touched upon plenty of things other than the 3 priorities I mentioned. So yeah, I enjoy learning new things on the job. And I think that's one thing that's unique about my role at LA Waterkeeper. And, yeah, thanks again for having me on this podcast.
Cool.
Cool.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you.